Hello there. Having looked at a couple of Amarones from Valpolicella, I thought it would be nice to finish off by looking at a Ripasso. So the one I have here is Vivaldi's Ripasso Valpolicella, and that's the 2020 vintage of that. Vivaldi is a brand created by Cantina Valpolicella Negrar, and the idea of the brand is to evoke the composer Antonio Vivaldi, with the idea of it being an innovative modern brand for the wines of Veneto, sort of encompassing Valpolicella, Soave, Bardolino and Bianco di Custoza. Now the cooperative was founded as the Cantina Sociale Valpolicella in 1933, and at that stage it had 7 members. In the early 30s, economic times were hard, and so it was sensible to join together as a cooperative. By 1935, they'd won their first medals for their wines, and the cooperative continued to prosper. In 2004, it renamed itself as the Cantina Valpolicella Negrar, and in fact, it's won the title of Best Cooperative Winery in Italy on more than one occasion. 2023 saw the cooperative celebrate its 90th anniversary, and by that stage it had 240 members who controlled over 700 hectares of vines. Now Ripasso is a style that sits somewhere between the lighter red wines of Valpolicella, light, fruity, quite simple, and the more complex, rich, full-bodied and alcoholic wines that are Valpolicella's Amarones. And this is achieved by re-fermenting simple Valpolicella with the skins from the Amarone. Vineyards here come from around Lake Garda. There's a variety of soil types. There's silty clay, there are calcareous soils, and there's Eocene marl. And all of these are cultivated to leave grass swards growing between the vines. The vines are grown with a training system called pergoletta doppia. And as far as I understand it, that is a sort of a fairly modern pergola style. So the vines are growing high above the ground, therefore they have to be hand-picked, but the fruit is growing in the shade of the vine's leaves to prevent the fruit from getting sunburn. Vine age is about 12 to 15 years. Once the fruit reaches the winery, it's destemmed, it's crushed. Fermentation is allowed to start. Temperatures are regulated to between 25 and 28 degrees so as not to lose too much of the wine's aromas by too vigorous a fermentation. And maceration of the skins in the fermenting must goes on for just 10 days. During that period, the skins are pushed back down into the ferment on 3 occasions each day. Once the alcoholic fermentation is complete, the wine rests in stainless steel until the February of the following year. At that stage it starts its second fermentation with the skins from the Amarone, which will have finished fermenting by this stage. Fermentation is quite a slow one. It goes on at 15 degrees and lasts about 2 weeks. A daily punch down is done throughout this process. Malolactic conversion is allowed to take place, and then the wine ages in wood. I'm not even told if it's oak. I would assume that this is seasoned old oak, but I have no information about that whatsoever. And then it ages for a further period in bottle prior to release. So let's see what we make of it, shall we? We've got a medium to deep colour. It's a relatively vibrant ruby red. The wine's got 13.5% alcohol. As I'm swirling it, it's forming some fairly respectable tears there. It has reasonable viscosity. The aromas are initially savoury with touches of spice. Behind that there's red fruit. It's a ripe red plum. There's a touch of sort of volatility, a little sort of high tone of sort of rose petal note, and perhaps just the slightest hint of cedar. So let's see what it tastes like. The wine has good freshness and a sort of a pleasant, juicy red cherry note. There are slightly dusty, earthy, drying notes on the mid-palate. And then there's a bitterness that's akin to that you see with the Amarone. There's a grip. There's really quite a nice bite. The wine's medium to full-bodied. The structure, although it's sort of rich and rounded and the alcohol is adding a little bit of weight, warmth and roundness to the mid-palate, the structure is actually quite soft, quite rich. It's not particularly grainy. It's certainly not astringent once you've got past the initial bitterness there. The finish has a fairly delicate, reasonable intensity of a sort of a juicy red cherry note becoming more sort of richer red plum. The wine is relatively simple. Its fruit doesn't develop a lot in the glass. It has a fair weight, has a little bit of structure. It's a nice enough wine, but I can see why its aggregated critic score on Wine Search is at 86. It's not the most refined or most elegant example of this. I think 86 might be a little harsh, but it's not too far off. This is a relatively enjoyable wine to be drunk over the next 3 or 4 years that has more intensity and richness than a basic Valpolicella, but not really the tight structure and fresh acidity that you might need for a wine to age for a longer period and gain any greater complexity. I don't think you'd gain much from aging this. At the same time, I also think it's a versatile wine that would go with quite a large range of foods and be quite enjoyable in that situation. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you've been watching a few of these tastings, it's probably worth signing up and subscribing to our channel. We really would appreciate your support. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on to them. It would be fantastic for you to share it. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please add those in the comments box below. I will of course leave a link in the notes to the page on the Wine Searcher website for this vintage of this wine, where you can see the wine's pricing, its availability, what the critics have said about it, any background information we have it, there's a price history, there's all sorts of information there for you to discover more about this wine. So thanks again for joining us, and do please try and make some time. Come and join us for another tasting in the near future, won't you? Bye for now.